Introducing Lloyd Smith. This Saturday, Lloyd Smith will be competing in the humorous speech contest at the District 9 Fall Conference in Pendleton. This evening, he'll be presenting what he thinks is the final version of this contest speech. Those of you who have heard it before will probably be happy to know that it's about 10% new. Well, that'll be interesting. We'll be able to listen to the new parts. I've heard Lloyd's speech, I believe, 3 or 4 times now, and every time it's a little different. And I find it exciting. It's a little more polished each time. Tonight's speech is also Project 6, Vocal Variety, from the Competent Communication Manual. Lloyd Smith and Get Down.
It was a warm Friday evening in the summer of 1958 when I was a 10-year-old kid growing up in the Spokane Valley. My 6-year-old brother and I looked up when we heard our dad come into the living room. He was carrying his Texaco road map, and our hearts sank because we knew that he was planning the Sunday drive. Madam Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters, back then nearly every middle-class family took a drive every Sunday. If you don't have your memory jolt a little bit at the mention of the Sunday drive, it's because you're on the other side of the generation gap from those of us who had that experience. The Sunday drive was exactly that. The entire family got in the car and drove somewhere. Our destination that week was Steptoe Butte. If you've never gazed on that scenic wonder, imagine a colossal rock sticking up out of the Palouse, not very far from Colfax, Washington. That's all, a big rock. On Sunday afternoon, we got into our family car, a 1953 Plymouth Belvedere 4-door sedan. It was dark green with a genuine vinyl green and white plaid interior, scientifically designed to capture and hold all of the summer heat. We looked pretty much like every other family on the road that day. In the front seat, my dad was wearing dress slacks, a short-sleeved white dress shirt with a narrow black clip-on tie, and gray fedora. Next to him, Mom was wearing a bright print summer dress. In the back seat, my brother and I were already slouched in misery with his coffee can. He enlivened our drive every Sunday by becoming violently carsick repeatedly. That's why we had an empty Maxwell House coffee can lying with a couple of sheets of newsprint on the seat between us. It was just as wonderful as it sounds. We made it to Steptoe Butte, got out of the car, looked at it for a few minutes, and then got back in the car to head for home. I was dozing in the back seat, leaning as far away from my brother as I could get when it happened. The car suddenly began swerving from side to side on the pavement. The tires were squealing, my mom was screaming, and my dad was shouting words I had never heard him say before. He skidded the car to a stop on the shoulder of the road and started having a fit in the front seat. He was slapping at himself and thrashing around, still shouting. I saw his knees go up above the steering wheel 2 or 3 times. He shoved open the car door and leaped out onto the pavement, where he began flailing his arms and hopping around maniacally, still shouting. The fedora flew off his head and was trampled underfoot. He popped the buttons from his shirt, yanking it off and throwing it down, while my mom said, "Please don't tear your shirt, don't tear your good shirt." He dropped to the pavement and began rolling from side to side. His heels were kicking at the ground, and he spun himself around in 2 or 3 tight circles. In the back seat, my brother and I were hanging out the window, agog with amazement at the spectacle we were witnessing on what was the best Sunday drive ever. He saw them first. He pointed and said, "Wow, look at all those bees." But they weren't bees. They were yellow jackets, about a half dozen of them, flying around my dad and stinging him. As he had been driving along with his elbow out the window of the car door, he had scooped a little swarm of them into the sleeve of his shirt. After a while, they flew off and quit stinging my dad. He lay still on the pavement, moaning a little bit. Then he got up, struggled into the remains of his torn, stained shirt, put the dirty crushed fedora back on his head, stuffed the clip-on tie into his pants pocket, and got back in the car. He sat there staring straight ahead, gripping the wheel with white knuckles and trembling a little bit. I could see the angry red stings on his arms and neck and face. After a moment, my mom turned to him and said, "Oh, did you get hurt?" Dad slowly turned and looked at her for what seemed like an hour. Then he turned slowly back forward again, jerked the car into gear, and we squealed off onto the pavement, headed back for Spokane. As the years slowly rolled on, those experiences faded into the past, until one day in the middle 1980s when I was watching the TV news. They were doing a story about a brand new cultural phenomenon that was sweeping the nation. As I watched the video, I realized I had already seen it all those years ago in 1958. As he rolled and spun on the pavement next to that '53 Plymouth, my button-down conservative dad had invented breakdancing.